Hi, I'm Reed Blakemore, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. We're here in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt at COP27 doing a series of interviews with stakeholders from around the global community, policymakers, industry leaders, NGOs, all to discuss the issues that we see as critical to moving the COP process forward in a critical year for climate change. I'm here today with Dan Lashof, Director of WRI US. Dan, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, we're asking everyone here kind of the one simple question of this is the implementation COP. There are any number of delegations arriving to Sharm el-Sheikh after making huge, commitments for raised ambitions in Glasgow last year. There's a need to execute on those ambitions. What are your expectations for the COP this year?
Well, I think it's twofold. First of all, the formal negotiations are centered around this issue of loss and damage, which is establishing a mechanism for dealing with the consequences of climate change that we can no longer avoid. And that's important. That's important to the credibility of the process and some sense of camaraderie between nations. And so that has to move forward. And so far, those negotiations are going well. It's on the agenda formally for the first time. There'll be lots of back and forth before the end of the conference, but that seems like it's moving in the right direction. The second point is, as you said, lots of commitments last year. We want to see concrete action to follow that. That's not just about money, but it's around policy commitments. It's around providing more details and plans. For example, the methane pledge last year. Hopefully more countries are joining, which is happening, but also what are the detailed plans to actually implement at least a 30% reduction in methane, as just one example. Similar things around the First Movers Coalition, where businesses have come in and said, we'll be the first buyers of low carbon steel or concrete. We'd like to see more members. We'd like to see real deals starting to be announced. So there's a lot of energy here and huge turnout. And I think given the complex geopolitical situation that we're coming in, the fact that people are here and they're still focused on moving the ball forward on climate change is an encouraging sign. At the same time, we're so far behind. The urgency is huge, and we really need to see action accelerate at a dramatic pace.
I think you're right. It seems, given the fraught geopolitical context that we're in, it's really actually heartening to see so many people come here and really think through how to navigate that complicated intersection between energy security and geopolitics and the urgency of climate action. One thing I want to pull you back in on, though, is you mentioned credibility and engagement, and I think that's one of the big successes we saw of last year's COP, particularly in regards to the United States, where the arrival of the Biden administration came with a significant recommitment to the COP process. This COP, we're seeing, elections in the United States, where we're likely to see, certainly a split Congress in some cases. We're also going to have a presidential visit. How are you seeing, the U.S. re-engagement on climate unfolding in the second half of the Biden administration? What do you see as the key objectives of the United States at this particular COP? And how do you see, importantly, other members of this COP process throughout the rest of the world interpreting the U.S.'s actions on this stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is COP27, but it's COP1 for the United States being able to show up with a transformative climate law in place domestically. So I think that gives President Biden much more credibility that he can actually deliver on the promises that he made last year. At the same time, there's still questions about that. The split Congress potentially will make it more complicated, particularly to deliver international climate finance. Folks around the world pay a lot of attention to U.S. politics. They realize that it's a polarized country and things could change in another 2 years in terms of who is sitting in the White House. So it's no longer a unipolar world. People still pay a lot of attention to what the United States does. It has an incredibly important role to play here, but people are also looking to the EU and to China. And so I think those three major players are pushing the ball forward, sometimes together, sometimes not so much. But as long as they're moving and accelerating action, then we're seeing progress.
So I guess, my last question to you, you talk about, so long as we're moving and accelerating this process and accelerating that access, we should have some confidence in the COP process. What do you see, are the key objectives that need to happen moving forward beyond this COP, looking ahead to COP 28 in Dubai, right? How do you see the next year of climate action unfolding, whatever happens over the next couple of days here in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Well, I think one of the key measures is going to be the level of investment in the clean energy transition, particularly in Africa. And this is an African COP. One of the major themes that we're hearing is that while there's been a huge increase in investment in renewable energy around the world, most of that's gone into the United States, into Europe, into China, and very little has reached Africa and other developing countries and smaller markets. So I think that's a key piece of this, and that's both public finance and private finance. That's one. Second is moving forward with a process to create one version of this is a global shield, a sense of we're all in this together in dealing with the consequences of climate change. We need new mechanisms to make sure that countries can recover more quickly when climate disasters happen. And in the last year, we've just seen such a tremendous set of impacts all around the world. Pakistan, Germany, the United States, China flooding. I mean, so it's just been a really astounding and terrible set of consequences linked to climate change. So I think there's clearly urgency around getting in place some mechanism for trying to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. The challenges of climate change only continue to grow. The urgency only continues to grow, and that's why I think it's so great to have such a profound group of and profoundly diverse group of constituents here at COP to help move that ball forward, to help keep those world leaders accountable for that action. And so that's why I'm glad to have interviewed you. So thank you so much, Dan. It's a pleasure to have you. We'll be doing plenty more of these interviews over the next few days here in Sharm el-Sheikh. So for now, we're signing off, and we'll see you soon.